Order for April 19th, 2018. First item is roll call, and all commissioners are present with the exception of Commissioner Warner by prearrangement. Do we have a determination of legal notice?
All items were properly noticed.
Is there a director's report?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Just wanted to go over a few items. First, would like to introduce our new planner, Izzy Doherty, who comes to us from the East Coast. Before coming to Mendocino County, he was finishing up his master's degree, and he was previously working with civic organizations doing public outreach. So, Izzy, welcome to Mendocino County.
Welcome, welcome.
So the next item I want to mention to the Planning Commission is that on April 10th, we took an item to the Board of Supervisors with regards to accessory dwelling units, seeking direction to move forward an ordinance amendment. Along with that was the section of the code dealing with vacation home rentals. Basically what's happening here is we have Section 2164 of the zoning code, which is the accessory codes, and so what we wanted to do is basically get clarification and direction from the board. So this item will be coming to the Planning Commission as an ordinance amendment. I'm looking at probably July, so it'll be before you. So what we're trying to do is bring the second residential unit ordinance that we currently have in the zoning code in line with the state model ordinance dealing with accessory units. And again, we call them second residential units. We've always called them second units. The state now calls them accessory dwelling units. And so we're going to try to line it up with the state. And then there's also another word that's used in there called junior accessory dwelling units, which is no different than what we do in our code as far as detached bedrooms and guest cottages. So again, the purpose is to align it and bring it consistent with state code. And with that, I also want to give the Commission an update on what's been going on with the fire and recovery. So, as I've always mentioned before, we've been dealing with the administrative permits for those areas that were affected where they can bring back an RV and temporarily live on their property. We've had 63 of those permits applied for. 57 of them have been issued so far. But probably the better news is dealing with building permits. Is we've actually have issued 48 building permits to date, and that's a combination of either stick-built or a modular. And right now we currently have 19 permits in queue. And we do have some private cleanup sites where people have chosen to clean up their property. 24 have been released to the property owners, and I believe there's 4 that are still pending right now that we either are in the soils testing or they, as I believe, the remaining 4 have had 3 have had debris removed, and we're waiting for soil testing on those. But that's pretty much it. We're pretty close to being 100% done with debris removal in the county as far as the public cleanup. So that's just a quick update on what's been going on.
One question, just kind of a technical thing. Do you have to, if people chose to do their own cleanup, does the county do all the assessments of safety, you know, the soil testing, as you said, and those kind of things?
That the county does not do that. The private property owner does that on their own,
okay.
And they must submit the test results to the county environmental health department.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a follow-up question on the vacation home rentals. What direction did the board give on those?
The board basically looked at the existing ordinance, and one of their biggest concerns was whether or not these vacation home rentals were taking housing stock out of production. And I don't know what you were at the board meeting on that one, and it really wasn't a direction as far as to support or not support. It was just bring back an ordinance that would deal with the vacation rentals. And I think the idea was to look at something other than the use permit. So we're going to be looking at possibly an administrative permit for some of these vacation rentals. But again, that's something that we have to analyze and see, because the original issue was that a use permit is required if access is being taken off of a private road, and no use permit required if it's on a public road. The issue again is many times, and this was something that was done back in the 90s where the code was amended to deal with, I'll call it the inequities of private roads, where somebody proposes a use, does it, and they're impacting or providing more of an impact on the private road, and they're not paying their fair share. At least this way, there was a public notice for all those that are taking access off the private road. Here, this is something that we're going to have to continue to explore. So it'll be some sort of an entitlement, whether it's an administrative permit or we come back and give the board options and have them take one of the many options. But again, the issue is really the access and the impacts to the private roads.
Go ahead.
So 48 building permits and 19 in queue. Do you have an estimate of how many we have left to go? How many, I forget how many houses we lost.
I want to say it was close to 300. So we do have a long ways to go. But I do understand that we're further ahead than our counties to the south as far as issuing permits.
Okay, now is the time for matters from the public. The Planning Commission welcomes participation in commission meetings. This item is limited to matters under the jurisdiction of the commission that are not on the posted agenda and items which have not already been considered by the commission. No action will be taken. Does anyone wish to address the commission? Seeing no one, we'll move on to the consent calendar. No items on the consent calendar. So we will move to the regular calendar, case MS 2016-0001.
Good morning, Madam Chair,
Good morning.
Commissioners. So this is a minor subdivision. The applicants are Merlin and Duane Black. Agent was labeled as from France. This is a minor subdivision of a 4.83 acre parcel, creating 4 parcels, ranging in size from 0.92 give or take acres to 1.35 give or take acres. The location is about a mile southwest of the Redwood Valley Town Center, lying east of Yuba Drive. Basically, it's the little corner on the east side of that road. And it's located at 8087 Yuba Drive, Redwood Valley. It is a zone rural residential parcel, as well as its general plan land use by the general plan. There is an existing house and garage on the property, as well as an existing well and 1 Redwood Valley water meter. We received comments from Redwood Valley Water saying that they won't be able to serve to any new parcels at this moment because of the situation right now. But so wells will be considered for the new parcels by the applicant. This project was referred out to all the concerned agencies, all the jurisdictions involved, and we received no negative comments aside from the one with Redwood Valley Water. The key issues on this one, we evaluated the general plan and zoning consistency, and it is, as well as the division of land regulations. This subdivision will create conforming size parcels. In each one of them, there's going to be access as provided by the agent's tentative map. A couple improvements that will help the access into the new parcels. We also look into the environmental aspect of this. So initial study was made per CEQA, and the staff recommends to adopt a negative declaration and grant MS 2016-01 for the project, as proposed by the applicant and based on the facts and findings attached here.
Any questions for staff? Go ahead.
Eduardo, on the packet, I'm sorry, I don't see a page number here, but it's the, called the Wildland Urban Interface Zones. And I have not seen a map like this before. So I'm hoping you might be able to explain it to me. I didn't really understand, and I didn't see where it really talked about. There's a blue thing that says water, but I didn't really understand the green and the different colors on this map. So perhaps you could clue me in on what this means.
I'll actually answer that question for you, Julia Acker, Senior Planner. And so the Wildland Urban Interface, this actually comes into play at the time of a building permit. And so as part of the Building Division's review of a new permit for single-family residence, they do look at the Wildland Urban Interface. I can't tell you exactly what that may indicate to them in terms of if there's an additional standards that they must look at, but that the Wildland Urban Interface really comes into play at the building permit phase. This is a map, though, that we do have normally produced by our cartographer, often though it doesn't make it into the packet just because it's typically handled at the building permit phase.
So it doesn't have as much to do with water as it does with Wildland Urban Interface?
It's really more about fire hazard.
Fire hazard, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And then I had a couple of other questions. I can find them here. On page, this one does have, page 7 of the packet under hydrology and water quality. And perhaps I've seen this before, but I'm looking at number 9B, which reads substantially deplete groundwater supplies or interfere substantially with groundwater recharge such that there would be a net deficit in aquifer volume, et cetera, et cetera. I wondered how that was determined. Does the applicant provide that information? Has it already been determined that it won't be an issue or there's no impact? I guess what I'm getting at is I have a concern here about water, and I have a concern about, we'll talk about this too, 4 additional parcels that need water, and also septic, and whether or not, I mean, I understand this is just for the subdivision, but obviously we're looking at additional housing here, and I guess that's my concern. So how was that determined?
Would you like me to answer too? So, Julia Acker again, Senior Planner. So for this item, you know, typically we would look at any comments that would come from our Environmental Health Division about any concerns related to, you know, very low water supply requirements or concerns in that area. And so how the conditions are written do require that there is water testing. So this isn't to say that they will be able to demonstrate the adequate water supply. That's a condition of the permit approval, that they will drill the wells and actually provide the testing as required by environmental health to adequately show that they can support the density that is proposed here. So at this time, we don't have any comments from environmental health indicating that there is a significant concern about substantially depleting the aquifer as a result of this project. But depending on the results of any water testing that is done, that may show that there could be a challenge with providing water to these newly proposed parcels.
And thank you.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if you know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask anyway. What is the separation required between a septic and a well?
And actually, I believe we have a representative from Environmental Health here, so if we can have Marlena come on up.
Good morning, Marlena Dooley, Environmental Health. Your second question regarding the setback. It's a 100-foot setback between a source of contamination and a drinking water well. I wanted to kind of circle back to your first question about this water. For inland proof of water, the requirement is that they provide a proof of water well pump test. It could be done on the existing well that they have now, and we're looking for results of a ½ gallon per minute per proposed parcel. So how well that well produces will dictate whether or not they have to drill another well and do another test immediately, or if that first well demonstrates adequate water in that area.
So is that for the existing residents?
And
The
yes,
well for the existing residents? Okay.
yeah.
And I'm not sure if you know the answer to this or if it would be planning, but do we require on those shared wells, you know, if they're testing off just the one well, does there have to be an agreement with all the parcels about sharing the water?
If they initially propose to share just the well, then we do require that, and we work with county council to make sure that the requirement is recorded as a deeded easement for each new parcel.
Okay, and I have another question, and Marlena, you might want to stay up here because I'm not sure if it's for you or for the planners. On page, well, it's under the condition 13. Reads water quantity evaluation of 1,200 gallon proof of water test.
Yes.
Could you explain what that means?
So before, it's a specific part of the test. Before they can measure how the aquifer recovers, they have to pump out a minimum of 1,200 gallons. It is the lowest amount required. The coast, you can go up to 1,700.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I have one other question regarding the parcel map, for the tentative map for minor subdivision. On proposed parcel 2, there's an existing modular home which does not show on the map, and I think there's another outbuilding or something, at least one there. So I wondered why that did not show on the map, if that was approved with a permit because of a second unit on the existing parcel as one parcel. And if so, well, number one, why that isn't shown on the map, and number two, I'm curious where the water and sewer is for that modular home. Yeah, and that may be the applicant's question.
Okay. If the applicant doesn't mind coming up to answer that, certainly.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Dwayne Black. When we put in for the division, so our children could have a parcel and build homes on it. And because it would take so long for the division, we got a second residence approval for the modular on that one lot, which we had a idea where the lines were going to be and everything. So we got permit to put the modular, the soil testing, the septic system, and they are getting water right now off of the well, the existing well that's on the property. So those have all been permitted, got permit for it all, and it's all been finalized, and it's been recorded and all that.
So is there?
We did that for ahead of time because we knew it was going to take so long for the division, and that's why we did that. So once we get it divided, then they can get their own loan and get a separate parcel. So that's what it's for.
Thank you. Now, is there an easement agreement for that water from the existing well then?
Not at this time, but when this goes through, if they're going to continue to use that well, we would give them an easement for that well, or they would drill their own well there.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Can I ask a question?
Sure, come up to the podium, please, and state your name.
I'm just curious, like, we've had a water moratorium out in Redwood Valley for like 35 years. And I'm just wondering why none of us out there have been able to get additional water supplies with all the other building that's been going on for the last 35 years. And they obviously have water from either Redwood Valley Water District, which is now part of Regina Water District or whatever. So I'm just curious why other people can continue building and get water in out there, we can't.
Any staff or?
Marlena Dooley, Environmental Health, I have a little information on that. I don't speak for the water district at all, but Redwood Valley Water District gets their water from Lake Mendocino. So they have not tried to stop the development of wells in their actual physical valley because it's a totally different water source than they're accessing. So they have allowed people to rely on the groundwater supply in Redwood Valley, which at this time has been sufficient for those subdivisions. But I know they're working with the consolidation to see if consolidating will provide additional water through adding Millview and all the others to one system. But really, it's been a limit from the Army Corps on Redwood Valley for no more acre feet out of Lake Mendocino. That has stopped them
That's your
from.
answer.
Yeah.
For what it's worth. So I guess that brings up the question. It seems like some of these that we've approved in the past for wells, they also have an option if indeed Redwood Valley Water is able to get more water, that they can connect to Redwood Valley Water, because I believe you're already connected with the existing property, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yes. So is there, or maybe you know the answer to that. I'm not sure who to be asking here.
I know they give out hardship cases and stuff first.
And- And in the past, if Redwood Valley Water District had provided 2 connections, they didn't renege or revoke one of those connections. They honored what connections were existing. So some sites had and paid for and purchased and maintained more than 1 connection. They maintained those, but they were not going to issue new connections for second residential units or for subdivisions.
Thank you.
I know we've done this a little out of order, but normally this is when we give the applicant a chance to speak if they have anything to say to the project.
So we don't have any other questions, no?
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion or? Okay, so now we'll open the public hearing on this matter. If there are any members of the public who would like to address this item, please step forward.
I'm Gail Nedros, also live on Yuva Drive. And I just wanted to express a concern on the water table there, because I have a well on my property, and which is great right now and has been since last year's rains and everything. But before that, it was hard. You know, the water well was really running low, and if you put a few more wells in, I'm a little concerned.
Well, again, I don't speak for the water department, but I know there is a process for testing that also estimates the drawdown on neighboring wells.
Right. So that was the only thing that I had to say. That, you know, I understand that that's a subdivision down there that can be, and I think it's a different zoning than I am. I'm an R2 and they're an R1. And so I don't know. I know that I was not able to subdivide, but I'm not sure. That's much more complicated, I'm sure. But I am pretty concerned about the water.
Thank you.
That's it.
I do have a question. I'm looking at the parcel map here, and on the parcel portion of the parcel map we have, I don't see your name, Nedros, here.
I'm across the street on the top of the hill, Nedros.
Okay, so it's probably further off the map than what I have here.
Yeah, I'm 7920, which is up the hill from that, and I think the parcel maps on this was just basically the lower section.
It's what it looks like. Thank you.
She would like.
Oh, NITROS.
Anyone else from the public hearing to address this item?
Hi, I'm Michelle McQueen, and I probably am on your parcel map because I'm directly across on the hill, and I just want to express my concern about the water as well. It's my only concern. Michelle, M-I-C-H-E-L-E, McQueen, M-C-Q-U-E-E-N.
Yeah, I don't see you on the parcel map either. So
7960.
These are
I
just-
think it's pretty close around there on the flat.
Yeah.
Okay,
It just
thank you.
seems since we purchased our property, because I believe we're zoned for a 2-acre minimum. This is the bottom of our hill. When we drive down the hill, it's just turning into mass modular homes. So it's a concern that, you know, if we're going to continue to let people split their property, it's just going to turn into a major subdivision, which well, we purchased our property because it had a 2-acre minimum, meaning we weren't going to get tons of new homes around us in our vicinity. And we've lived on our hill for, 18 years. So the water is a concern, especially after having a drought for the last 5 years. So that's our only concern.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission.
I had a question for environmental health, just in light of the concerns expressed. Could you go into a little more detail about condition number 13 and how that 1,200 gallon proof water test may or may not address the concerns that we just heard about?
Certainly. Marlena Dooley, Environmental Health. The proof of water test that's on condition 13 is different from a hydrological test. The proof of water test is a stress test on the aquifer in that well that well is accessing. It does not require that while they pump that well down, they check the neighbor's wells. That's the difference between a proof of water and a hydrological study. And inland subdivisions of this size do not typically require a hydrological study. In the coastal areas, in the coastal groundwater study, it is very common if you're in an identified critical or minimal water sufficient area to have to do that. But inland, it has not been required.
Really?
Yeah, we don't have an inland groundwater study, which is part of what the Carrie Brown's been sitting on our groundwater. Ukiah Valley has been working towards new groundwater legislation that came out of the drought in the state. And it is part of the plan for us to first understand what our aquifers are at and then designate them. We really only have that knowledge for the coastal groundwater areas in the coastal groundwater study right now. So past inland subdivisions have not been required to do that. That were minor. Some of the major subdivisions did, but currently the minors have not.
So it appears that is being revisited. Okay, thank you.
And do we know about the aquifer or aquifers in the area, and whether or not this whole subdivision area is served by one or more? Just curious if, the people on the hill versus the people down low, are they accessing the same aquifer?
It is assumed so. We do not know that for certain.
Okay.
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Gadrowski, just to say one more thing about the legislation we're talking about was for groundwater sustainability agencies. So, well, the issue of what would be required where, I would want to say it's being revisited, but that's a whole new law where I think we're still sorting out what exactly it's going to mean. So I just don't want to leave the impression that we have answers forthcoming. There's a whole agency with different responsibilities, and we'll see where exactly that goes in the coming years.
Is that a state agency then, or a county, or all the counties working together?
Or? It's for each basin. Here we have a joint powers agency that was formed. The county is a part of it, but the other water districts are as well. So there's different moving parts, and they have their own meetings and procedures and requirements.
I have a question for you, then. If in the course of our discussions it was chosen to ask for that hydrological study, is that a condition we can legitimately request?
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Gadrowski, I'm not aware that it would or would not be. And I looked at Marlena for a moment in terms of what that study on the coast, if that's what would trigger that requirement legally, or if we'd have to do something different, if we could just impose it on an ad hoc basis. I don't have an answer for that.
I guess my question is that we are dealing with a district on moratorium. So that implies something about that aquifer.
Well, I don't know that it does. In terms of, they have their water rights and they get where their water rights are located, I think is divorced from what they've done with their groundwater. So I think their water rights all come from Lake Mendocino, if I'm correct. So this means they haven't sought anything else in terms of controlling the groundwater in the area and doing a municipal style well to serve with their pipes, or acquiring additional water rights either from the lake or elsewhere. So from my background with the Water District's moratorium, that's an issue that they've chosen to not address, and so have allowed people to continue to drill wells with the knowledge that if those wells do fail, there's no backup from a municipal water supply.
Any other questions?
I'm not sure I understood the answer. Would we be allowed to place that as a condition, a hydrological study?
Hi, Julia Acker, Senior Planner. So the challenge with adding that as a condition of approval is really that is a future study. There has been past case law about not conditioning projects based upon a future study. And the challenge would be if that hydrological study came out negative, we would be looking at a reconfiguration of the parcel. So that would actually be something that would not really be appropriate as a condition of approval on the project. It would be something we would want to have completed before taking action on the project.
Do we have any idea when this study is going to be done? You said that, yeah, there's one in process.
The inland area.
They're both on. I don't know. The legislation timelines go into 2025 for what the local area has to develop for their groundwater sustainability, and the state's long-term plan for implementing what these local areas come up with as their groundwater management plans. So in the next 5 years, we are supposed to create a plan for our specific basin that is showing that the county, in partner with the water districts, is managing our basin properly.
So you said our basin. Isn't there more than one?
There are. We presume Redwood Valley and Ukiah down to Hopland, that whole river, are probably the same. But I don't know that for certain. Some pockets are different. And we have never required identification of basins from water tests. It's a big project that is in the beginning stages.
And it is presumed one basin for purposes of the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. The boundaries are drawn from Redwood Valley down to Hopland.
That's my opinion.
Well, you'll have to push the study.
Those were drawn by the state. There's a state bulletin, so that's how that was drawn years ago. They've been revising those generally for smaller boundary changes. But overall, the Ukiah Valley Basin is drawn as one large body.
I hope you realize that we are taking your concerns about water to heart. I mean, obviously, we have been addressing that. The other side of it is I don't really want to hold up the applicant when I don't know what the process is here. I think 5 years or 7 years or whatever is an awful long time for us to address this, and I know you don't have that much control over it either, but you know, we've been faced with this, particularly with Redwood Valley. We've discussed this so many times, and yet we still keep approving him. I don't know when the buck's going to stop, and I certainly don't want it to stop with our applicant, because I think it's an issue that needs to be addressed on a county and a state level sooner than 5 to 7 years. I don't know what we can do about that, but I guess that's my
Pray for rain.
Well, yeah. But it is something that definitely needs to be addressed. But I don't know that us little Mendocino County area can push the state to do it. But anyway, that's my point.
Anyone else? Do you have a motion?
Then I think we have a motion by resolution, the Planning Commission adopt a negative declaration and grant MS 2016-0001 for the project as proposed by the applicant based on the facts and findings and subject to the conditions of approval 1 through, I remember what it is. Anyway, the conditions of approval as in the packet.
So, Deputy County Counsel Matthew Gadrowski, Madam Chair, we would like to add one special condition of approval based on the discussion regarding the modular home on one of the other parcels being created, and I think Julia has language for that.
So this would be condition number 22 on the project, and essentially it would state that the applicant shall provide a revised map showing the existing residence on proposed parcel 2, including the leach field location.
How does the maker of the motion feel about that?
I think we're going to hold off for just a minute here for Marlena.
Oh, okay.
I see that environmental health conditions were based on having no development on parcel 2. Since we all agree that there is development on parcel 2, our items number 10 and 11 need to change just a little. We need to take parcel 2 from condition number 10 that says they need a primary and a replacement, and move parcel 2 into condition 11 that says they only need a replacement area since they already have a primary.
I'm sorry, could
Okay.
She's saying
Sorry.
that instead of all 3 of these being
try this?
undeveloped and needing
okay.
a first and a second, now just the ones that are undeveloped are going to need that, and they'll just need a replacement.
So we're
site for
removing,
parcel 2.
we're removing parcel 2 from condition 11 and adding that into condition 11?
10?
From 10 to 11.
From
Moving
10
from
to
10
11.
to 11.
Got it.
And we probably should talk about whether or not right now we want to require a deeded easement for water sharing between parcel 1 and 2 or not.
Since the existing well from parcel 1 is currently serving the unit on parcel 2, so I think certainly that should be something discussed.
I don't know if we
Well,
need
how
to.
can we do that if it's not really totally done yet? I mean, the division and all of that.
This would be a condition of your subdivision approval, so it'd be something you'd comply with now after.
By the end of it.
Correct, correct.
And just for the applicant, it isn't really, as long as it's all in family ownership and occupancy, that we're so worried, but someday down the line, other people might buy these parcels and not have water. So that's where that concern comes in. I'm sure it's working perfectly fine in your family.
Whatever language you would like to have.
That's why I looked in there. So we're going to want to add a special.
So do you want a minute to?
If we could have a moment,
Sure.
that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Special condition
I'm thinking that it'd be nice if we had something coming out of this discussion, like a recommendation to the
Well, but that could be a separate motion.
Yeah, after we're done with this.
That's okay. I don't care if anybody hears.
I wouldn't forget.
Anybody want a bathroom break? We could do it while they.
I asked Steve, and he's not.
Okay.
We're going to be done here in 15.
We are.
other hand, if we're just gonna sit here for 15 minutes.
I think we need to discuss that under matters of commission.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to just say that we're a little worried. I mean, we're headed back into drought. I mean, really, all we can do is ask them to make it a priority. We good?
Yes.
Okay,
So-
do you have another condition or just a revision of some other condition?
We will just be revising the condition 22 that we intend to add. And so this will essentially be stating that the applicant, and Marlena would like to add also condition 23 to the project. So I'll just start with condition 22, that we'll be requesting that the applicant provide a revised map showing the residence on proposed parcel 2, including leach field and easement between the well on parcel 1 serving parcel 2. And then I will let Marlena speak to the language related to condition 23 to be added.
Excuse me, before we go on, how are we addressing the easement issue for the water? Okay, sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
Next one.
And then Environmental Health would like to add special condition 23 that will require a deeded easement for the sharing of water and maintenance of the well between parcels 1 and parcels 2 to be approved by Environmental Health and County Council.
Are we good?
County Council was just suggesting we add a line stating, upon the drilling of a well on parcel 2, said deeded agreement will not be required.
Just to try and clarify, so we're requiring this easement between these two parcels, but as noted, these parcels may get their own separate wells. So in the event, right now we're saying parcel 2 is definitely sharing water. We want to see that on the map. We'd like to see easement at some point showing the rights and obligations between these two parcels. However, if parcel 2 drills its own well, I don't want this condition to remain that we have to have this easement on there in perpetuity. So the ability to eliminate the need for the easement should parcel 2 have its own well. Just to not have to come back here, have any questions in the future about what to do with this easement if they drill their own well.
So do we have that clearly defined in condition number 23, because I can't repeat it?
All right, let's try that again.
Yeah.
Okay. Environmental Health would like to add special condition 23, requiring a deeded easement for water sharing and the maintenance of the well located on parcel 1 to be shared with parcel 2 in the event that no additional well is drilled on parcel 2. To the satisfaction of Environmental Health and County Council.
There you go.
Sorry. Gotta write these down.
Could you say that one more time?
Environmental Health would like to add special condition number 23 requiring a deeded easement for the sharing of water and the maintaining of the well located on parcel 1 being shared with parcel 2 in the event that a well is not drilled on parcel 2 to the satisfaction of Environmental Health and County Council.
So if at a later date, 5 years from now, a well is drilled, then this requirement goes away?
If the subdivision hasn't been finalized,
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski. If the subdivision gets final, they don't have a separate well, we want the easement. And going forward then, there doesn't need to be a requirement of that easement. It can get, we wouldn't have a problem if that easement then goes away in the future should they drill that second well. And if they drilled the second well before then we also want to make sure that before it's final, we can then say, oh, that requirement doesn't have to be met because you've drilled a different well. So if before this is finalized, they have a separate well, staff can say on its own, no need to do this easement, you drilled a separate well.
So if 5 years down the road, the property is sold and the easement is, and they drill a well, what is the process of getting rid of the easement?
At that point, to the extent that it would be either unnecessary or they wanted to convey that between themselves, I guess that would be between the property owners at that level. I'm not sure the county would get involved if that separate well was already drilled. But to the extent anyone asks us a question about that at that time, gee, can we remove this easement? We'd say, is there a separate well? And they'd say, yes. We'd say, okay, we're out of it. You guys can deal with it. That was there to protect parcel 2 in the event that there wasn't a separate well drilled.
But wouldn't that show on the parcel, and wouldn't it have to be removed from?
I was going to state next that we should add the similar line to condition 22 that would also state that should a well be drilled on proposed parcel 2, that the easement would not need to be shown.
Yes, that's what I was trying to get at.
Thank you. Yes. My apologies to the secretary. So condition 22, we would add a line at the end of it, which, so I'll just read the condition all the way through, stating that the applicant shall provide a revised map showing the existing residence on proposed parcel 2, including leach field, and easement between the well on parcel 1 for the benefit of parcel 2, acknowledging that if a well is constructed on parcel 2, the requirement for the easement, there is no requirement for the easement. That sound okay? Okay, thank you.
So I know I made a motion. Is it allowed to ask the applicant if they're comfortable with this?
It's okay with me.
Does the applicant have any issues with either of those additional conditions? Okay, thank you. Then my motion stands with the addition of condition number 22 and 23 as stated by staff.
And the modifications of condition 10 and 11.
Oh, thank you, Victoria. Yes.
I'll second the motion.
Commissioner Nelson.
Yes.
Commissioner Ogle.
Yes.
Commissioner Purnell.
Yes.
Commissioner Kruger.
Yes.
Commissioner Hall.
Yes.
Chair Holtcamp.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. We are now to number 7, matters from staff. Are there any matters staff would like to bring forward?
Hello, yes, Julia Acker, Senior Planner with the department. And I spoke with Mary Lynn Hunt, the Chief Planner, this morning. She indicated that at the last meeting, the Commission had asked about any projects that had previously been heard by the Commission and any sort of status updates on where those projects may be at. So she did look at the statuses of some of those various projects. Not many in the last few years have actually started the development phase. So we don't have much to report with regards to that other than there is, I will just note, the City of 10,000 Buddhas was issued a grading permit in August of last year, and they will be beginning their construction for the grading for the new facility that they are undertaking. So that's going to be starting this month.
Was approved how many years ago?
Oh, well, it depends which iteration and the various modifications that have been done. But yes, it's so it's nice to see that project is breaking ground.
So is there any news on the asphalt plant up on the Willits grade?
I do not have any news on the asphalt plant myself. I am not sure if County Council has an update for you there.
Deputy County Council Matthew Kudrowski, there really is no update. There's 2 separate lawsuits that are still pending before the Court of Appeal. The first is on the use permit that was approved. The second is on the vested rights that were approved. And we've heard nothing from the court.
I had a couple of questions for staff, and I'm not sure if this is for Nash or perhaps Julia, you've answered every other question. Maybe you can take care of
I will try my best.
Thank you. First of all, I happen to be looking because I've missed the last few meetings. So number one, I wanted to go online and look at the videos from those, and I just had a heck of a time, and I could never find them. It looks like the website may have changed in the last couple of months or few months, and I could not find it, but I'm not that computer literate, so maybe I overlooked it.
The videos from the Planning Commission meeting are not uploaded to the county website. They're uploaded to YouTube to make them more public friendly.
Well, it didn't help this public. Okay, thank you. So I guess you just go to what, Mendocino County Planning Commission on YouTube or what?
Yes, if you go to youtube.com and type in Mendocino County Planning Commission, our meetings pop up right there, all of them.
Thank you, Victoria. And I also noticed in going through on the map that it shows that Roger Kruger's term ended last year. Has your term been approved for?
That was an error.
Okay.
I've worked with Matt on that. My appointment was in December of that 2013, so it would have been normal to have it expire in January of 14, which would make it 4 years for January 18. But I was reappointed in June of the following year, so that added additional time.
Okay, so perhaps we could have that updated for the.
So that one should be updated.
Yeah. Do you know what year that would be, Roger?
The expiration, it would be June 3rd of 2018.
2018. Thank you. This year?
I will contact the clerk of the board's office and see if we can get that fixed.
Okay. Video. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, matters from commission.
I guess I should bring this up briefly. I mean, we've been down this road before, but it comes up. It comes up again about we shouldn't be authorizing subdivisions for wells that we don't know exist. I know we do have inland. We have environmental health has quantity testing, but as I remember, like you take a four parcel subdivision. Only one of those needs to be tested, correct? Which I suppose if we've done so far, we can carry on. Just it was brought up today, and it reminds me that it's dangerous territory.
I guess I would like to ask a question. If it's done on the coast, wouldn't it be? I guess nothing's easy in government, but couldn't we also carry that onto the inland area, or recommend to the board? What's our process here? I mean, I agree. Obviously, we all have concerns about the water.
The climate is definitely changing.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be addressed sooner than 5 or 7 years or whatever. What can we do?
So, Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski, in terms of the timeline set by the state legislation, those are deadlines. If we're able to get work done sooner by virtue of working with the JPA, that's great. Now, that Joint Powers Agency and that basin would only cover a small portion of the county. The Ukiah Valley, including Redwood Valley and down to Hopland, still is a pretty small percentage of the overall county. I think the issue, as Ms. Acker pointed out, where we're talking about the groundwater study done for the coast and requiring those going forward somehow inland, that's a very large study that would, with a lot of different components to it. That probably could not happen overnight, especially when the state legislation is more specific than that. I think even beyond that, you're looking at the next areas that might even be eligible in the county where Willits and Little Lake Valley, but they're not. That groundwater basin is not as stressed as the one here in the Ukiah Valley. So, without having either the requirement or necessarily the funding for a groundwater study that would tell us inland where all our potential problem areas are, we don't have, or taking that on our own, notwithstanding state law, we're probably going to have, right now we have the requirements we have, which is we make sure we have people do a test, and if we want to try and set additional issues with that could get worked out through direction from the board if need be. But at the moment, we required the well testing. If there's not water there, there's not water there. They can't put a house if that stress test doesn't work, correct? I mean, the groundwater study is going to say it will be a very large process, and that's where that kind of future study issue that we can't require with it right now, it leaves too much open on something we've already approved. This kind of stress test is more of a up or down vote on whether they have the water for a house. Am I wording that correctly?
So just to back up, the minor subdivisions inland, you could have one water source prove the water availability for those 4 and a remainder. Major subdivisions, it was one water source for up to 10 parcels in the subdivision. So in the coastal groundwater study, in the areas that were identified as marginal and critical, it specifically called out for having hydrological studies in addition to having a proof of water per each proposed parcel. So you've seen subdivisions that each parcel had to prove a well and also possibly had to do a hydrological study of the neighboring wells around it. Inland, it had not been required based on the lack of the groundwater knowledge, really, and because historically we hadn't had a problem improving water on those parcels. That's changing. I absolutely agree with you. But you are correct in that it was one water source for inland proof of waters for minor subdivisions. It is different in the coastal groundwater study in specific areas. That's part of one of your questions, and I think I got a little off track on some of it. But it really comes down to funding a groundwater study that proves where the water issues are, that we can base requirements on or limit development due to those known facts.
A question about that. Is it safe to say that those requirements on the coast add to the cost of housing because of those additional study requirements?
I think probably so. A hydrological study, unless you can do it yourself, will cost you tens of thousands of dollars.
Tens of thousands.
Yeah. Depending on how, you don't know how many wells are in your neighboring area.
And that's for each parcel?
It would be one water source while that one is being drawn down, measuring all the other wells in the neighboring area to see if this pull out makes those drop too, in a very general term.
And those are only in specific areas of the coast that are mapped with these critical and marginal sort of water resources, as well as areas we will see a subdivision coming forward, hopefully in the near future here, that does have a variable zoning density, meaning that they're able to go to a higher density, smaller minimum parcel size requirement with proving through a hydrological study adequate water supply. So it can certainly depend on which area you're working in.
So I guess when we approve these subdivisions, such as we did today, the next process probably would be for them to then apply for a building permit for each one of these parcels. I mean, if they're going to build on them, in which case that would be when they needed to provide proof of water. I guess would they have to provide proof of water then? Okay.
No, before the subdivision can be finalized and the parcels are legitimized and allowed to be sold off individually, the proof of water quantity and quality and septic are required to be submitted and approved before I will tell planning that environmental health, all our conditions have been met.
So by us creating a subdivision, we're not at fault for requiring that we did not require proof of water. That goes to the next step when they apply for a building permit.
We required a water quantity test.
The subdivision, the actual parcels cannot be created until an adequate water supply has been demonstrated to the satisfaction of environmental health.
Okay.
That's those conditions of approval. I believe it was condition 13 on
Which
the permit.
was done. Yeah, with the, okay.
And just to be the devil's advocate, we also presume they're going to find septic for the size that they want to find also. That's not always the case everywhere.
Thank you.
Do we know the quantity of water in the well they do have?
I do not know off the top of my head. I know in Redwood Valley, we have not had a problem doing that. Years ago, when we had a water agency, I worked with Dennis and Dave Jensen when we were working on a minor subdivision out there and compared all our water pump tests for a mile radius because the water agency was really, this has been an ongoing conversation for years. We're all trying to figure out how to address it. And so I know that all of the well pump tests that we've had have been sufficient off of one well for their subdivisions in the past 8 years.
Any more on this issue?
Well, I'll attempt to wrap up my thoughts with what might be a summary. I think you could tell we're all concerned about the cumulative impact of continuing to approve these minor subdivisions and what that might mean in the next drought or, you know, down the road, impacting neighbors and even those minor subdivisions themselves. I'm feeling hesitant to require any further hydrological studies, just knowing what that would do. It's expensive to try and develop housing here, and if we're suddenly adding another layer of cost and bureaucracy to it, that seems like that could just further exacerbate the housing crisis. So I think the question is, how can we address both of those needs in a reasonable way? And if I'm hearing the commission correctly today, our will is to have that addressed sooner than required by those state deadlines. So I think the question is, how can that be prioritized at the county level to potentially move more quickly on that?
Deputy County Counsel with kind of 2 points. One, matters from staff, matters from commission aren't really necessarily general discussion topics or providing direction to staff. This is, you know, just a couple questions. If we need to come back and agendize that further, that's fine, but it really is minimal discussion and we can bring things back so that the public knows what we're talking about. But to some, in terms of groundwater issues, there's a groundwater sustainability agency that probably is taking the lead on what exactly is going to happen with this one portion of the county. Beyond that, I don't know that we're going to have solutions differently in a way that we'll have more information to be able to even require hydrological studies in certain areas if it was deemed necessary to do so. So that's, we'll see exactly how that goes forward, both in the Ukiah Valley Basin and outside of it. But at the moment, we have our general rules which say we follow these things in certain areas, and we don't have necessarily the ability to require things beyond that prior to a subdivision. The hydro study would be required before we've gotten to this point, not afterwards. So this is a bit, we've had a good some discussion on it. I'll see if we need to bring something back for a more general topic, but generally.
And I was going to suggest to Ms. Acker that maybe at a future meeting, if we have a lighter agenda, that somebody from that Joint Powers Agency could have an informational item or something so that we could ask these questions and of somebody who actually is prepared to speak on them.
We can certainly look into getting something arranged.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess legally, as long as it's approved through environmental health, we legally could not, we couldn't not permit a subdivision if those requirements are met. I mean, yeah, okay. That's the end of that.
Right. Okay, have we run this subject dry?
I think so.
Okay.
Pun intended.
Yes, they are. And now we have the approval of the February 1st minutes. Victoria?
Prior to today's hearing, 2 of the commissioners noted a couple of corrections that I'd like to read into the record. On page 3 of the February 1st, 2018 minutes, the bottom, the sentence began, Miss Hunt states. At the end of the sentence, we were missing the words a grading permit. So the sentence should read, Miss Hunt stated that creating a road would be allowed in rangeland as long as the applicant had a grading permit. The second correction came that Purnell was not included in the yes votes on page 5 of the February 1st, 2018 minutes. Her name had just been left off the I votes and all voting, to be quite honest with you. So we just added her in there.
And then I think there was also a correction on page 3.6C, the first paragraph that begins with Ms. Hunt, Board of Supervisors, and S on the end of that second line. And then I wanted to address another issue because I had not been here and I did not hear the verbal report, director's report, and I don't know if you had a chance to talk to Adrian or not on that. I think you're right, Victoria. In other words, it just says, Mr. Gonzalez presented a verbal director's report. I would like to know what he delivered rather than just a report.
I had the opportunity to speak with Director Gonzalez prior to the hearing, and we will be adding a little bit more to the director's report, kind of summing up the important details.
Great, thank you, Victoria.
With that, do we have a motion on these minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of February 1st with the corrections as noted.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, I guess we could have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So are you going to apply for another term?